Welcome back. So one legal decision made this week could have major consequences for two of the key figures involved, Donald Trump and U.S. District Court Judge Aileen Cannon. A federal appeals court ruled that Cannon overstepped when she granted Trump's request for a special master to review the documents seized at Mar-a-Lago. The court then ordering that Trump's case be dismissed. It's obviously a huge setback for Trump and will allow federal investigators to move full steam ahead with their investigation. Of course, Trump still has the chance to appeal, and we've seen him use that tactic repeatedly. And we'll get into what this means for Trump in a moment, but let's talk a little bit about Judge Cannon. Take a look at some of the headlines in the aftermath of this decision. Different outlets said Cannon's ruling was eviscerated and slammed, and point out the growing calls for her impeachment. Cannon represents one of the most significant legacies from the Trump presidency, the sheer number of conservative judges now in place across the country. But all three of the judges on that appellate panel were appointed by Republican presidents, with two of those judges being Trump appointees. So, what does this week's ruling signal? I'm glad to welcome my good friend, former federal prosecutor, MSNBC legal analyst, and the host of the podcast Justice Matters, Glenn Kirschner. Glenn, good morning, my friend. Thank you for being here. You know, with the caveat that Trump can and will likely appeal, where does the DOJ's investigation into the documents seized from Mar-a-Lago now go, seeing how a special master has been eliminated and we now have special counsel Jack Smith?
Yeah, I think most importantly, Katie, this clears the decks for Jack Smith. And, you know, let Trump appeal. How many times recently has he tried to bubble up a case or an issue to the Supreme Court only to be pretty quickly slapped down? So this appeal will go nowhere. But the good news is Jack Smith and his prosecutorial team will now have unfettered access to all of the documents, all of the evidence of crime that was seized from Donald Trump's Florida home, Mar-a-Lago. And I have to believe that they are full speed ahead working toward indictments.
Glenn, there are some calls for Judge Cannon to be impeached. You and I, as former prosecutors and as lawyers, we know that sometimes judges just get it wrong. In this instance, though, it is not unfair to say that Cannon looked like she was an additional member of Trump's legal team here. As the 11th Circuit noted, it seemed like Judge Cannon overstepped greatly, sometimes even inserting arguments on behalf of Trump that didn't even exist. But really, Glenn, how realistic is it to expect Judge Cannon to face any professional repercussions for her bad rulings?
You know, Katie, as you say, we both know judges sometimes get it wrong, but they usually don't get it lawless. And that is what Judge Cannon did. She acted in a lawless way. You know, I think the most devastating line in this whole 21-page opinion appears on page 20. If I could urge everybody to just read the few paragraphs on pages 20 and 21 of this opinion, it is about as close as an appellate court opinion comes to what I would call rule of law poetry. Here is the one line that I think is devastating to Judge Cannon. The three-judge appellate court panel unanimously said just because the search warrant was executed on the home of a former president, quote, does not give the judiciary license to interfere in a criminal investigation. That is going to leave a mark, Katie, because that is a three-judge appellate court panel saying Judge Cannon acted in a way that was lawless, and she interfered in an ongoing criminal investigation, not just any investigation, one that has enormous national security implications because of the nature of the documents Donald Trump stole from the White House and unlawfully concealed at Mar-a-Lago. I don't see how that doesn't give rise to a judicial misconduct investigation. Now, can we expect a Republican-controlled House to move forward on articles of impeachment? Unlikely, but there has to be an investigation of some sort of what prompted Aileen Cannon to act lawlessly.
You know, Glenn, you are a busy man making sure that we understand everything that's going on, but you also sat through that Oath Keepers trial. Another big headline this week, a jury, as you know, convicted Oath Keepers leader Elmer. I love saying that part, by the way. People always say Stewart Rhodes, but I have to put the Elmer part in. Elmer Stewart Rhodes and one of his associates for seditious conspiracy in connection with January 6th. Glenn, this is a case you've been tracking closely. What stuck out to you that our viewers need to know about this verdict, and what does this mean for the DOJ's Trump investigation?
Katie, probably the single biggest takeaway is the federal prosecutors have been vindicated. Not that that's our job to look for vindication when we make a decision to bring a difficult case, a challenging case, a politically charged case. But, you know, the jury saw it the prosecutor's way. Prosecutors believed they had enough evidence to meet their burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt that the Oath Keepers, this organization, committed the crime of seditious conspiracy, that they violently tried to overthrow the government, or that they violently tried to resist the laws of the United States, which is precisely what they did. They tried to stop the certification of Joe Biden's presidential win. This, I think, will embolden, it will energize the federal prosecutors because, Katie, this week coming up, there is part 2 of the Oath Keepers trial. We saw that infamous military stack formation going into the Capitol. Well, this trial only held accountable half of that stack. The other half of the Oath Keepers stack is coming up for trial next week. And after that, the Proud Boys are coming up in their seditious conspiracy trial. And these verdicts, I am quite sure, will inspire all of those defendants who are pending trial to perhaps think about reopening plea negotiations, maybe with cooperation. And so I think this is going to have a ripple effect, and those ripples may now ensnare people like Roger Stone, Alex Jones, Mike Flynn, and others who were closely aligned with the Oath Keepers, with the Proud Boys. And we don't know where those ripples will stop, but this is a good development, not just for the prosecutors, but for the American people and for democracy.
Glenn, when I have legal analysts like you that are so in tune with what's going on, I always want to ask them the following question. And you don't get to have an explanation. You're just going to have to give the answer. Are you ready? It's you get 3 options to answer. Donald Trump's going to be convicted first on Mar-a-Lago documents, 1-6, or Fani Willis down in Georgia in Fulton County. What's your pick?
His Mar-a-Lago documents crimes, because that frankly poses an ongoing threat to our nation's security.
Boom goes the dynamite. Glenn Kirschner, my friend, I always have you here because justice matters. Thank you for joining us this morning, as always.